Well, it turns out that I am going to do the power rankings today instead of what I said yesterday, or technically today when I did the match week number 4 review show, that I was going to do this on Monday. And the reason why I'm doing it today instead of tomorrow is because the Sports Hop series that I was supposed to do today was canceled. The game that I was going to attend today for the Sports Hop series, episode number 32, got rained out. And what was so shady about that decision was that it was sunny today. There was no chance of rain at all, and yet the game got called off. I honestly don't know why exactly that is the case. I mean, when you hear the word rain out, it's pretty obvious that it has something to do with the fact that maybe it's because it's raining and stuff like that. And a lot of non-league here in the U.S. tends to be more strict in terms of when it does rain. They usually cancel the game because they worry about their athletes getting injured. But yeah, if it's not raining and it's sunny, then why are we not playing? Like, I honestly don't understand why that is the case. And what was so infuriating was that I woke up 8 in the morning for that, and I found out like 10 minutes into my walk to the station to get to the stadium that the game was called off. I had to literally walk back and then go back to sleep, and I only got like an hour of sleep before I had to do the baseball vlog series. So yeah, that was very frustrating, but unfortunately nothing I can do about it. And instead, we're going to just focus on this from now on, because I kind of spent a little bit too much time talking about that. And also kind of explain why there wasn't a Sports Hop series today, like I said from yesterday, in case for those that do not follow me on Twitter, because I did kind of post it on Twitter. But anyway, let's start in the bottom. And for the third straight week, this team is going to be stay in this spot. And that, of course, is Colorado. And have they not conceded that 91st minute goal in that game against Sporting KC, they would have moved up big time. And I could argue that they probably could have moved up as high as 20th if they didn't actually blew that lead that they had. But unfortunately, that of course is the case. And I know I actually didn't even say this in my MLS Matchweek review, but guess what, guys? That's another 2-0 lead that has been blown this season. It seemed like every single week we're gonna have a game that has a team blowing a 2-0 lead, going up 2-0, but end up either losing the game or just drawing the game. So yeah, unfortunately for Colorado, I have to put them down in the last spot because they didn't finish the job. In 22nd, and this team also lost. Well, actually, this team lost. Colorado didn't. But this team lost, and they dropped 1 spot from last week. And that, of course, is DC United. Yeah, things are not going well for DC. It looked like this season is going to be very similar to last season, which is just going to be a year where they're gonna not be contention to make the playoffs, because so far this season they have only got 2 points out of the 4. And yes, granted, those 4 games were pretty tough. I mean, they had the opponent with the likes of Orlando City, Atlanta United, Houston, and also Columbus. Those are pretty tough opponents to face, but still, you know, only 2 points from the first 4 games. Things are definitely not looking good for DC United right now. And I only hope the fact that, you know, when they do get into an easy stretch, when they do win those games, then maybe they might have a shot. Maybe they will make up those kind of points that they kind of lost to those time when they have to face big teams like they are right now. But unfortunately, DC United, they are going to drop a spot in here. Into 22nd and into 21st. This team lost 2 spots, and also or not also, I gotta stop saying also, but this team drew this game, but I'm putting them to 20th and losing 2 spots from last week, and that is FC Dallas. And I know that some people will find this kind of really irritating because FC Dallas actually have 5 points right now this season. They haven't lost a single game. So why in the world do I put them near the bottom of the power rankings and near this 5th row? The answer is that they should have got 9 points coming out of the gate, and the fact that in this game for the 2nd week in a row they look like their opponents give them a win by getting a man sent off, they didn't take advantage of it, unlike last week against Seattle. And for Dallas, it is literally back to square one for them, and just this team is still going to be a team that, unless they can go on a pretty good run, then they're going to be stuck in that mediocrity table that they look like they really want to avoid from this season. But yeah, Dallas, of course, in 21st, and then in 20th, and this team did not play this weekend, but they moved up 1 spot, and that, of course, is Chicago. And I just want to quickly say that since there is a lot of teams in this power rankings, pretty much half of the team in the league did not play this weekend because of the international break. I'm just gonna talk about kind of like their next game and just what I expect and stuff like that, so that I don't keep repeating and saying that, oh, this team moved up 1 spot because of what happened around them, and what happened around them with teams that either win or lose, or the vice versa when I say that they didn't play and they lost a couple of spots and stuff like that. So Chicago, of course, playing against Portland at home in the next game, and that's a good opportunity for them to get some points, because so far it's been a goose egg for Chicago so far to start the season. And they obviously had a very tough game against Sporting KC, but then they had a very easy game against Minnesota and they lost that one too. So yeah, for Chicago, it's definitely not off to a great start, but they have a chance to get something out of Portland, who is still very banged up, and still have a lot of question in terms of their defense. So this is a good opportunity for them to get some points. But in 19th, and this team actually moves up 3 spots, and I think they are tied with the biggest mover. I think I have a couple of teams that moved up 3 spots from this week, and that, of course, is the Revolution. So the Revs obviously drew against NYCFC, and in some ways they kind of felt like they should have won that game, and if they had won that game, then they would have moved up even more, but unfortunately they didn't win that game. But at the same time, it's still a sort of a good draw for the Revs. I mean, I know obviously it's frustrated that they were by far the better team. They kind of outplay NYCFC for majority of the game, and yet they only came out of there with just a point at home. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. For the Revs, you definitely would. I mean, I think that's a good point to have. The Revs really need to like trying to get something from this season. We know that the Revs are probably not going to compete this season, so to get these kind of resort against a much superior team may be kind of positive, despite the fact that they probably could have got all 3 points. But yeah, that's all I can have to say about that. But yeah, moving on to 18th, and this team did not play this weekend, and that, of course, is Montreal, who, of course, stay at the same spot as last week, and they play Seattle away. And this is another good opportunity for Montreal to, come out of that win against Toronto with another win against Seattle away. Although it's definitely not going to be easy because Seattle is very good at home. But Seattle also have a couple of injuries that they're going to have to deal, and a couple of suspension that they have to deal with. And if Montreal can kind of repeat that performance against Toronto and put it in that next game against Seattle, then yeah, maybe they can definitely win that one, and they would definitely move up to a spot. And even if they drew that game, I'll still move them up depending on how, of course, they draw. If they drew in a kind of hard-fought fashion, then I'm definitely gonna move them up. But if they drew because they kind of blow a 2-0 lead, then maybe I might put them stay at the same spot. Oh my god, I basically just say what was the point of this power rankings, dude. I literally just said it at that point explaining Montreal's situation. But yeah, meanwhile, moving on to 17th place, and this team dropped 3 spots from last week, and this team drew this weekend, and that of course is Vancouver, who drew against the Galaxy. And the reason why I dropped them 3 spots is because this is a game that they should have had all 3 points. And when I say should have, I mean it, because the Galaxy, they were coming into this game completely depleted, and they basically had nobody but just some guys from last year and some guys from the USL, and yet they couldn't get anything out of it other than just getting a point. I mean, that is got to be really frustrating for Whitecaps fans, and because of that, I had to drop them down. This is a game that there is just no way in the world that I thought Vancouver was gonna not get anything other than the 3 points, consider how the Galaxy was. But instead, that wasn't the case. Vancouver were really poor in that game. They didn't really do well on the attacking end at all, and as a result, they moved down 3 spots. Meanwhile, in 16th, and this team stay at the same spot and also drew this weekend, and that, of course, is Portland. So the Timber, of course, drew this weekend against Dallas. And in some way, you could say it sort of is a good result for them because they were down a man for the last 15 minutes, and also the fact that they were in a very poor form coming into this away game against Dallas. But for Portland, the next game, which they play against Chicago, that's going to be another big one for them. And, we still haven't really find out that whether or not if the Timbers can really get something going and sort of maybe sort out their defense a little bit. Well, actually, their defense was pretty good when they play against FC Dallas, but still, that was just an FC Dallas team that, is a team that kind of really just sputtering in terms of the attacking end and the midfield, and it's kind of a team that is still trying to kind of recover from what happened last season. So, yeah, I'm just gonna say that probably is a one-off. Unless if they can put on that same display against Chicago, then maybe the defense for Portland might have been fixed. And then also an interesting fact that I found on the MLS Soccer website today was that Giovanni Cerverisi actually decided to bench Liam Richwell. And Richwell is actually probably the best defender they have, and certainly you probably think, why would you bench your best defender in these next couple of games? Well, when I meant that he's the best defender, I meant probably from what happened last season, because so far this season Richwell has not looked good, and it's pretty clear that Giovanni Cerverisi is trying to change it up. He's trying to move on, trying to make some changes on the defensive end. And yeah, we're going to see if that change that he implement will really kind of finally get this defense organized, because so far it still isn't that good. It's still a mess coming into the next game when they play it against Chicago. And in 15th, and this team was the biggest loser and dropped 5 spots from this weekend's game and lost to the Red Bulls 3-0 on the road, and that, of course, is Minnesota. And, I know some people will say that's kind of harsh to put Minnesota as the biggest loser, considering the fact that they were playing a very tough opponent, that is the Red Bulls, and it was away. But Last weekend, I put them very high, and I kind of sort of maybe regret myself by putting them so high up because of that win. I think I kind of got a little bit overhyped with just Minnesota actually won 2 in a row and actually over 500 for the first time in team history. So because of that, I decided that, you know what, this weekend, since they're back down to earth, might as well just move them back down to earth in terms of the power rankings, which is why I put them in 15th in this spot. I mean, it's still pretty high in terms of what I kind of expect them in terms of this season power rankings, but yeah, in that Red Bulls game, they truly were brought down back down to earth. I mean, they were just getting dominated by the Red Bulls throughout the whole game, and it wasn't until like the last couple of minutes they started to finally turn it on, and even then they just couldn't find a goal in that game. So yeah, Minnesota of course in 15th place, and in 14th, this team didn't play this weekend, and actually I was at this game when this team played against Club Lyon and lost against Club Lyon. And that, of course, is the Earthquakes. That, of course, is San Jose, who moves up 3 spots. And even though they lost to Club Lyon in that game, and even though that it was an awful performance by us, there's 2 factors why I decided to move up. One, that was a friendly, so it didn't count. Friendlies and other kind of sort of games does not contribute in terms of the power rankings. The power rankings is only looking at teams based on their performance in terms of league games and maybe CONCACAF Champions League games, but that's just a little bit. Other than that, if it's like a friendly or maybe an Open Cup game, it wouldn't count at all. And because of that, that's why it didn't count for them. And the other reason, of course, was because they were playing their B squad. They didn't really have like their key player, guys like Vako and Huson was not in that lineup, and it's pretty clear how when they're not in that lineup, this team just completely cripple, and that maybe is sort of a concern factor for the Quakes, because you know, if both of those guys went down, then we are sort of screwed, because those are the players that is a very kind of key player in terms of our attacking end. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really hoping that both of those guys won't win down. I mean, so far the Quakes have been really lucky with not a lot of injury. They're one of the few teams this season that still have not suffered any injuries, but time will tell that kind of stat would potentially be changing, because throughout the season every team have to at least suffer an injury either to their key player or just somebody else. But yeah, anyway, in 13th, and this team moved up 2 spots from last week, and that of course is Philly, who did not play this weekend, and the Union is actually playing against Colorado. Oh, and by the way, the Quakes are playing against NYCFC, but you probably already knew what I'm gonna say because I kind of mentioned it in my match vlog. So if you want more information about that, then watch my match vlog because I talk a lot about that. But moving on with the Union, they play, of course, against Colorado. You know, the Union, so far, they have been having a pretty decent season. I know, certainly, if they beat Colorado, then the Union's fan will really kind of get hyped up and pretty much be very optimistic. And I think they are rightly so to be optimistic, because I didn't think that Philly, and probably Philly fans, didn't think that they would be near contention for the playoffs. Although one thing that I will say about the Union, and probably one thing that kind of like a devil's advocate in terms of their kind of hype and optimistic that they can make the playoffs this season, is because they've been playing very easy opponent. I mean, New England, Columbus, and also now playing against Colorado, and then they have the Quakes at home. Those are pretty beatable opponents, and they haven't been really kind of like challenged by some of the big boys like NYCFC, Orlando City when they're healthy, or Atlanta United, or any of the big boys in the Western Conference. So Time will tell if Philly is actually for real or not. And if they do lose to those big boys, then it's pretty clear that that run that they had earlier in the season was because of the fact that they were playing so many easy games. And yeah, but either way, in 12th place, and this team moved up one spot as I dropped my notebook there, is RSL. RSL, of course, have a very tough game upcoming as they play against TFC away. And yeah, this is a tough spot for RSL right now because, RSL, they did get a huge win against the Red Bulls a week ago. But it wasn't a very convincing win at all. In fact, you could kind of argue that they kind of got lucky in that game against the Red Bulls. And now they have to play against TFC, and TFC would really want to get something out of that game, and certainly want to get at least get their 2018 kind of season started, because TFC, they haven't got a single point at all, and I'll be kind of surprised if they drop all three in a row. So it's gonna be tough for RSL. It's gonna be really tough for Mike Pecky's man to get something out of this. And if they do get something out of this, then I definitely would move them up in the table, because to get anything out of TFC, especially at BMO Field, is always an impressive kind of performance. But yeah, and in 11th place, this team moved up a spot from last week, and that, of course, is Orlando, who also didn't play this week, and they have the Red Bulls next. And really, I think the next game for Orlando City could maybe tell you what Jason Christ's status as the manager of Orlando City. Orlando City, I know they still have some injuries, but it seemed like they at least got half of those players that they signed from the offseason back. So there should be no excuse the fact that they can't really get close and compete against some of these kind of big boys. And also, they're playing this game at home too, and I know their home form hasn't been very good lately, but they got to at least get something or even get a win against the Red Bulls, because Orlando City, it has been a dreadful start to the start of the season. And we talk about how Orlando City, they're going all in this year. Well, if you're going to start a season with just 1 point, yeah, that is not a good way to start an all-in season. So the pressure is really on Jason Christ now, and really, I think the Red Bulls game, if he loses this, then he's getting close. He's gonna be very, very close, and I might not be surprised that he might even get sacked if he loses to that Red Bulls game. Well, actually, I think maybe the only time when he does get sacked in that Red Bulls game, if he lose, is if he lose 6-0 at home and stuff like that, if it's a huge loss. But yeah, Jason Christ, he is under a lot of pressure right now with this really bad start that Orlando City is in. And in 10th place, and this team moved up a spot from last week, and that, of course, is Houston. Now, the good news for Houston is that they are back home, which is a place that they are just pretty much unbeatable. And they are playing against New England, so it should be an easy win for Houston. Certainly for the Dynamos. So far they've been having sort of an up and down kind of season. I mean, on the upside, they of course got a massive 4-0 win, and a really shocking 4-0 win against Atlanta. But the downs has been the fact that they lost to Vancouver at home, and they blew a 2-0 lead on the road where they could have got that 3 points against DC United. So yeah, it's been a kind of an up and down kind of season. Hopefully Houston will be back to up in this one. I really think this is going to be an easy game for them, and they might, of course, move up in the power rankings. But yeah, in 9th place, and I'm actually going to put 9th and 8th in there also, because it's the two LA team, LA Galaxy and LAFC. LAFC moved 2 spots down from last week, while the Galaxy moved up 1 spot. And, first of all, for the Galaxy, the reason why I decided to move them ahead of LAFC was because of this week's performance against Vancouver. And I tell you what, I did not expect that from the Galaxy. They pretty much have absolutely no right of actually getting anything out of Vancouver, but yet they did. They got a point out of it. They got a hard-fought point against Vancouver, and yeah, I mean, that's just incredible, the fact that they were able to do it, considering the fact that they just have nobody in that squad in that game against Vancouver. So because of that, I had to move them up for that kind of performance and sort of move LAFC down because, once again, teams around them either got a big result or they, of course, got a win. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting LA derby. I mean, obviously the hype is up right now, and that hype even added more with the announcement of Zlatan on Friday and whether or not if he's going to play his first game as a Galaxy. I mean, it's quite crazy the fact that Zlatan is going to make his debut against the team, against LA's most hated team. Well, arguably the most hated team against LAFC. I mean, that would be very kind of interesting. But yeah, this LA derby is going to be very, very good. Certainly, the media will really kind of hyped it up and stuff like that, and we'll see who, of course, will win this one. But of course, I'll talk more about it in my match week preview. But yeah, in 7th place, and this team moved down 2 spots and didn't play this weekend, and that, of course, is Seattle. So Seattle, of course, they're going to be playing against Montreal at home, and I'm pretty sure they're going to get Ladero back for that game against Montreal, but they will not have Dempsey for that game against Montreal because Dempsey is suspended because of that red card that he had against FC Dallas. And yeah, it's still a very injury-riddled kind of Seattle team, and I don't know if they lose to Montreal. I'm not quite sure that Sounder fans should hit the panic button right now or not, because it feels like this is very similar for Seattle. This has been the case for the last 2 seasons of them always starting very slowly and just kind of decided to just relax for the first couple of weeks, take some losses, and really kind of got heat up in the last part, which is why hence they were so good in the playoffs in the last 2 seasons, because they heat up at the right time. So I don't know, should Sounder fan kind of hit the panic button again, even though that this has been the case? I mean, maybe this season that they kind of get off to a slow start and that their expectancy of them started to get hot and started to win some games might not be there. And if it's not there, then Seattle could easily miss the playoffs, and that would be a huge shocker if that is the case. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I think I was hoping Seattle was going to start out strong and that they don't have to once again rely on the fact that the second half of the season they need to win a lot of games. But it seemed like that is going to be the case again this season if they do lose to Montreal and pick up 0 points out of their first 3 games. And in 6th place, and this team, I actually didn't put it, but this team actually stayed at the same spot, and that, of course, is TFC. And like I said, with the RSL game, this is a one that I think they definitely could win and get something and finally get some points out of this. I mean, can you believe the fact that the 2 MLS finalists right now, both of them have 0 points, and we're literally coming into April now? Who would have thought that was a case that can happen? I mean, it's just so crazy. But for TFC, I think the reason why they have 0 point, and probably as the same case for Seattle, is because they had CONCACAF kind of commitment. They kind of want to focus that competition a lot. And we know TFC tends to do very badly coming off of a CONCACAF game. So, yeah, that's why they haven't really got things started. But I shouldn't really worry about TFC. I mean, TFC is still a very good team. I don't really worry about, like, unlike Seattle right now, with the fact that Seattle has injury, TFC doesn't really have a lot of injury on their team. And I think once they got done with the CONCACAF Champions League stuff, they of course will start to kind of turn it up and get back to where they're supposed to be, which is near the top of the Eastern Conference. Although they do have some work to do because teams like Atlanta and NYCFC has started to pull away from them a little bit. So yeah, it's TFC in 6th place, and in 5th place this team moved up 3 spot, and we're also the biggest mover, part of a couple of teams that moved up 3 spot, and that of course is the Red Bulls, who got a very impressive 3-0 win against Minnesota. And once again, the Red Bulls put out a kind of a experimental beat squad, and once again they got a result out of them. I mean, I've been saying that the Red Bulls this is probably the deepest team in the entire league right now, because they just have a lot of good prospect in their team and a lot of kind of players that plays for Red Bulls too, and literally can just come in and step in that spot and perform. And in this game against Minnesota, it was the case again. So yeah, for the Red Bulls, they're definitely a very dangerous team now that we know that they definitely have depth. And once they get guys back in these next couple of games, they would just get even stronger. So yeah, the Red Bulls could be a threat in the Eastern Conference, when many people didn't think that was the case when Sasha Kljestan left the Red Bulls. But yeah, in 4th place, and this team lost 2 spots from last week, and even though they rescued a 2-2 draw and came back from a 2-0 deficit, I still moved them down 2 spots because, that was a game that they probably should have won, and they sort of kind of got lucky that they got a draw out of that. And for Sporting KC, once again they concede. It's another game that they concede either 2 or more goals. It seemed like every single games throughout the season they have conceded more than 2 goals. Actually, if I do the math correctly right now, I think they have conceded a total of 12 goals in the last 4 games. I mean, that is just incredible. The fact that this team conceded, 27 or 28 goals last season in the whole 34 games of their season, and now they're up to 12 in those 4 games. I mean, it feels like this Sporting KC team is definitely changing the philosophy, but this Sporting KC team is also scoring too, so it's just a complete flip-flop in terms of the philosophy that Peter Vermees is putting with this team. And I think maybe Sporting KC fan will be happy to see that, because that kind of, if you're a team that have good attacking threats, then it would really make some interesting soccer to watch. So yeah, but still, for now, I'm going to move them down 2 spots because they couldn't get a result against Colorado when they probably should have. And in 3rd, this team moved up 1 spot, or actually not moved up 1 spot, but stay at the same spot, is Atlanta, who of course are playing against Minnesota on the road. And the last time Atlanta gone to Minnesota, they beat them 6-1. I mean, it was an absolute thrashing, and that was also the snow game too. So yeah, Atlanta is definitely back on track. They earlier in the first game of the season, people were panicking after they shockingly lost to Houston 4-0, but they have responded very well in these last couple of games by demolishing DC United and also kind of demolishing Vancouver in sort of a controversial way, that is. So I expect Atlanta to continue the good form, and maybe they will move up in one of these top 2. But yeah, in 2nd place, and this team moved up a spot from last week. Or actually not a spot. They actually moved up 2 spots from last week, and that, of course, is Colorado. Or not Colorado, I'm sorry, but Columbus. Oh god, I made the same mistake again. So, if you guys didn't watch my video from last week, you saw how there was 2 COL, and usually COL is like for Columbus, or COL is for Colorado, and the CLB is for Columbus, and yeah, I almost made the same mistake again, but yeah, Columbus in second place. They got an impressive 3-1 win against DC United, and this team is another team that looked like could be threatening to be in the Eastern Conference, like in the top 4. And I'll tell you what, that is almost 4 teams or 5 teams that can potentially compete in that kind of top 4 or top 3 spot. And I'll tell you what, the Eastern Conference is so stacked right now. I mean, if you think the Eastern Conference last year was stacked, this year I feel like it's even more stacked with teams like Columbus, Atlanta, the Red Bulls, and potentially TFC is started to get going. Yeah, this will be a very, very kind of interesting kind of fight for them. And hence, for teams like Orlando, this is bad news for them, because Orlando was supposed to be the team that was going to be part of that fight, but it seemed like that is not going to be the case unless they get their acts together. So yeah, it should be very interesting to see how the Eastern Conference will kind of shape out in the end of this year. But yeah, now moving on to the team that finished top and still remains on the top, but this might feels a little bit controversial because in that last game they kind of got outplayed, and that of course is NYCFC. But I decided to put them still in that top spot because considering the fact that they did not have David Villa in that game, and they didn't have Rodney Harris and Alex Ring for that game. And by the way, Alex Ring will be missed for 4 to 6 weeks, so that's a bit of a big piece that they miss in that midfield. So hopefully they of course will find a replacement for that. But for NYCFC, they still somehow find a way to get a point out of that one. And you know, so far with Villa having his absence in these last 2 games, it turns out that the guy that is stepping up and pretty much is sort of his replacement now is Ismail Tajari. Tajari has just single-handedly lifted this NYCFC team into sort of a time when they lose a couple of their big starters, and it's just another example of why NYCFC is going to be one of those 5 teams that I mentioned. NYCFC, Columbus, Atlanta, the Red Bulls, and TFC that is going to fight for that top 3 and top 4 and pretty much that top 5 spot, and which is why it is a really bad news for teams like Orlando to just, you know, get into that contention. But yeah, that of course is the power rankings done and dusted. Let me know in the comments below, do you agree with some of the teams that I put in? Do you think I put some teams way too high, or did I put some team way too low? And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.